Welcome to Crossover the Pond, brought to you by Sports Social and 21 Media Productions. He's Drew Lasker, I'm Josh Sexton, and this is an actual Crossover the Pond episode. We are crossing over the pond, quite literally, in this episode, because we've got Drew back in the States, back on home turf. And I'm
Sir.
gonna be heading out there soon as well to join Drew. But for now, he's got a sunny, nice background behind him. If you're not watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this via some sort of podcast app, you don't get to see Drew's glorious background behind him here. Whereas I'm just back in the office here in the UK, making sure that the podcast runs smoothly from the home turf here. But I'll be joining Drew out there next week. But Drew, how you feeling, man? A lot of travel for you the last few days to get over there.
Man, eventually, finally made it to the great state of Texas. You can see the background behind me. I love coffee shops in the USA because, I mean, I don't have it facing this coffee shop, but they have all kind of backyard games out here that you can play. And I love being outside. That's why I'm currently recording outside the coffee shop. So if you have a problem with my backdrop, tough. If you got a problem with my audio, with my travel mic, tough. We're on the road, baby. So expect it. It doesn't matter. We told you we was going to bring it to you from over here. Josh will be joining us shortly. But for now, you got to deal with the traveling Drew.
Absolutely, it's rough and ready. That's what it's going to be like over the next few weeks or so. As Drew mentioned, I'm heading out to Vegas next week to meet Drew there. Drew in Texas at the moment, but we're both heading out to Vegas to cover NBA Summer League, which we're both massively excited for. Hoping we can bring some cool content, cool interviews, and things over that next week or so. So of course, always keep it locked across over the pond for that UK perspective on the NBA. But Drew, because of all this travel, because of us just not being able to get our schedules aligned last week, we kind of missed like the bulk of free agency really. So I wanted to make sure that we could get on and sit down here together to react to some of those big stories that came out of free agency, because I mean there was a lot really. Even in my message to you, I'm realizing that I missed off Kawhi getting traded to the Raptors now as well, which, you know, as a Clippers fan, I feel like I always put that like in my Clippers podcast bag, and then I try and keep my main NBA bag for here. But loads of big trades have happened, a few big free agent signings as well, so we'll try and get through as many of them as we possibly can sort of within the hour here. We're not going to try and cover the whole thing, but at least give you some of our thoughts and perspectives. I guess we'll take it from probably the most recent big splash, Drew, but also maybe the biggest splash that's happened of the offseason so far, with Jaylen Brown being traded to the Philadelphia 76ers for Paul George, 2 first-round picks, one of which has like got some strange swap language around it, and who can even figure that out, and then 2 second-round picks. The first thing I thought when I saw this was like, wow, that's a really small haul for a guy like Jaylen Brown, no matter what the Celtics, you know, sort of think about his, you know, ongoing fit with the team in terms of the 1A, 1B with him and Jason Tatum and things like that. And even the bits that I can like start to make sense in my mind, where like Brad Stevens did his press conference last night and talked about, you know, how he was worried about having 2 players taking up 70% of the cap and all these things. All of these things make absolute sense. Like, I can't dispute any of that. I can imagine there's a world in which the Celtics look more like a complete team next season. We've literally watched that happen last off-season for the Celtics, where they almost did addition by subtraction. But the thing I can't get away from is, God, that is a low sum for Jaylen Brown, as good as Jaylen Brown is.
What did I say on here when we were specifically speaking about Kawhi Leonard? I said the NBA has changed. There's no teams out there that's going to give you 5, 6 first round picks anymore, just because the way the NBA has transitioned into, you need that depth. And so when you look at someone like Jaylen Brown, it just tells you that no team really has leverage, right? Because obviously the Celtics have the leverage of having a superstar, but then they are truly capped. So their hand is forced to where you got to get under the sacred second apron. The NBA has become about making business decisions. This was definitely one, it was a business decision. Two, it was the simple fact that, again, you need one ball dominant guy now. You know, having 2 of those guys, it just doesn't seem to work. So now you got the ball dominant guy and your superstar that's already there, and then you got all these pieces that fit around, like Paul George. On paper, he fits perfectly. 40% three-point shooter, amazing in the corners. The question is the health. But what does Boston want to do? They want to get 50, 60 threes. And so the big question will be the health with Paul George. You get one less year on the contract, so you get off of it a little bit sooner. And so you have flexibility in the future. Tatum, excuse me, I'm Tatum, not mine, kind of ran away from me earlier. So
Yeah.
you got flexibility in the future, and you can build around Tatum in 2 or 3 years, but you also put yourself in a position to where you can win now. So again, this came to a money deal for the Celtics. I was surprised that they dealt it to Philly, but from what we're hearing, there wasn't a whole bunch of options out there for the Celtics. But I think this is something that fits the Celtics in the short term and long term. It obviously were things that were going on behind the scenes with Jaylen Brown that we weren't aware of because they were not been so keen to get rid of him. This wasn't the first conversation that they had of putting Brown on the trading board, specifically with Giannis. So there's rumblings in the background that we don't see, we don't hear, and it was obvious that it just didn't fit anymore.
Yeah, and I guess the Giannis section of that is interesting because of what Brad Stevens said in his press conference about the idea of not being tied to two guys for 70% of the cap. Because if they'd have traded Jaylen Brown for Giannis, it'd have been over 70%. Giannis earns more than Jaylen Brown and is sort of on the block really for more than Jaylen Brown. So even interested in that sense really. I'm kind of not surprised on the 1A 1B thing that Tatum has been, they've kind of nailed their colours to the mast with Tatum as the 1A, 1B guy. The one thing I'm interested in, and like especially of the coverage over the last few days and weeks that I've seen, I've been soaking up all of it, especially Bill Simmons. Like anything Bill Simmons I can get my hands on at the moment when there's a bit of a mess in Boston makes for box office viewing. But a lot of people have been saying, well, oh, Boston said at the end of last season they wanted to, move away from a certain style of play, and that was kind of perceived as, oh, well, they don't want to go from this like outside in game. They want to go more inside out and find a healthier way of generating their threes. And I think some people have took that as like, oh, so why would they trade away Jaylen Brown, who can get to the basket, and go for Paul George, who can no longer get to the basket and is only really like a sit in the corner and shoot threes guy without thinking about what he does on the defensive end, of course, because he definitely can bring it in that sense still. For me, I think like Jaylen Brown proved last season, he's a brilliant NBA player, of course. All of the things that people have said about him and his accolades in the last few days, none of that is getting taken away. But as you say, Drew, he's ball dominant. He pounded the ball so much last season. A lot of it was heavy isolation plays. It's why I actually think when it came to playoff time and when Jason Tatum was back in the fold, the Celtics couldn't really lean on their muscle memory of being like, okay, now suddenly we've got two guys who want the ball and we want to move the ball around a little bit more and stuff, because throughout most of the season, Jaylen had to carry that offensive burden. And, one of the things I keep hearing is about the toothpaste being too far out the tube, but in reference to Jaylen's off-court stuff, I actually think it's much about the on-court stuff, really, as in Jaylen Brown had realized what it was to be a heavy ISO guy, to be the one leading star on a team, and it's so hard X's and O's wise to get away to make him at 28 years old or whatever he is get back to being, no, actually we want you to for one C to Tatum will get you the ball a lot because Tatum's a better playmaker, but if there's a better shot for Peyton Pritchard in the corner or there's a better shot for Sam Hauser in the corner, you've got to pass that ball out because we're not still trying to beat the odds of being a 50-win team.
Yeah, you made a great point there. As much noise has been made about the stuff off the court, this was very much so an on-court decision as well because you think about Tatum, you think about Brown. The issue is that they operate the same space in their isolation, the middle third of the basket, the top of the key, that's the area. So they're really on top of each other. And so, and when you give someone a taste of that baton of being the man, it's hard to give it back, Josh. It's like, once you had a Miller and Carter steak, it's hard to go back to Weatherspoons. You know what I mean? And so, Jaylen Brown has got a taste of the good champagne, of having the ball in his hands, of controlling the ones and twos, and now all of a sudden you got to go back to playing Robin. It was very clear that he enjoyed playing that role. He was very vocal about it on the stream. This was the most fun I've ever had. And this is a guy that's won a championship, that's won finals MVP and had a ton of individual accolades, but it was clearly that this style of basketball he enjoyed a lot more. And from the Celtics perspective, this tells me that they're going to put a lot more burden on Peyton Pritchard to be that secondary ball handler. And Pritchard has proven that he can do it. I don't know about the Jalen Brunson comparisons that I've seen out there. Maybe so. He does have a big body. They're the same size. They both finish well inside the paint off 2 feet. So perhaps, but you're putting a lot of stock in him, and maybe again they're in the building every day. They see what we don't see. So maybe there is something to that. But on the other side with Philadelphia, specifically from Jalen Brown's perspective, if you are happy being ball dominant, I can't see you being happy in Philadelphia because think about Maxi has a lot of usage um, with the ball in his hands, and so he's not heavy isolation from the middle thirds. He does it a little bit differently. He does it in transition. He does it off, semi transition. So maybe there's a way to coexist, but he is not going to play the way that he probably envisioned. I was always assuming it was going to be a team to where he can have complete keys of the team. So it'd be very interesting to kind of monitor Jalen Brown's happiness.
Yeah, I think there are fit issues for Philadelphia to figure out. Like me and you have been saying all season, really, that the era of the super team is over. Maybe Philadelphia is going to try and prove that wrong to an extent next season by having effectively a four-headed monster, if you want to include Joel Embiid in that. I mean, I'm getting slightly tired of doing what ifs and things around Joel Embiid, but there are fit issues to figure out there. As you say, Maxi is a ball dominant guy, albeit he does it in a different way. Tatum and Brown were really quite similar in the areas of the court that they operated in. I am interested to see there is only one ball. We've said this so many times over the past few years. We said it when James Harden joined the Clippers, and feels like when James Harden joins every team, basically, that there's only one ball. So it'll be really interesting to see sort of who brings the ball up for Philadelphia, what role Jaylen Brown slots into, because this doesn't feel like the move that necessarily gets him his team. But I want to pick up on something you said before, Drew, to use as a segue, because in this return for Jaylen Brown, which I still just don't think is enough, even given the caveats that you've given there, I still don't think it's enough. But I think Boston just felt like they had to pull the trigger at this time. They've clearly taken this trade because they felt like they're getting something back in terms of on-court ability in Paul George, and they're getting a little bit of draft capital that they can maybe use to, reroute and keep this Tatum timeline alive. But you mentioned Kawhi Leonard within that, and as I said, I didn't put him in the notes to you, but we'll move on to talk about his move to the Raptors, because that was probably one of the reasons I almost framed the Jaylen Brown return as a bit of like a pitiful return. Really, was that the Clippers managed to get more for Kawhi Leonard than what the Celtics got for Jaylen Brown, and more valuable picks really as well in terms of the longevity of those Toronto picks that the Clippers have got back. It's interesting for loads of reasons. I've covered this on my Clippers podcast, so I'm interested to hear your perspective more so than anything else. But it was clear that like Kawhi wasn't going to get the extension in LA. He's chosen one of the places that he's called home before in Toronto, and there was reports that he would even consider San Antonio for his next extension and potentially the last extension of his NBA career now. But if you're a Toronto Raptors fan thinking that this is 2019 all over again and that Kawhi is going to lead you to a championship, at risk of sounding, like this could be clipped up next year when Toronto's got that second ring for Kawhi, third ring for Kawhi, but a second ring with Kawhi on the Raptors, I could look foolish, but this is not that same player anymore. And I have to say, from my perspective as a Clippers fan, again, interested to hear yours, Drew, the way the Clippers have pivoted away from what was really quite a tricky era, money-wise, and how much of their assets were tied up in, OKC and things like that. The Clippers have pivoted away in a really interesting way, I think.
I'm excited for the Clippers. You totally wash your hands with the Kawhi Leonard era, who, in my opinion, has just been a disaster. Kawhi did not hold up his end of the bargain. And again, I'm just take my opinions with a grain of salt because I'm just taking the things that I hear through the national media, just like you. But it just doesn't seem as though he fully grasped being a Los Angeles Clipper from a marketing perspective. To promoting the organization, from a financial perspective of leaving them flexibility to bring in pieces, and so I'm the debacle in the Paul George trade that robbed the Clippers of their assets. They seem to have recovered some of that back with reshaping this roster, and I actually think that they are a lot more exciting moving forward, but specifically focusing on Kawhi, Toronto, and why the Clippers were able to get more than Jaylen Brown is because the Clippers weren't in a position of disparity, right? And also Kawhi Leonard's uh, he's up for an extension, so there's flexibility there. In regards to Toronto, they're not tied into him for 3 years. Obviously, I'm assuming they're gonna negotiate a new contract, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a lot more team friendly. He might get the money, but it's gonna be shorter years. But I just think for both teams, it works. It's a match made in heaven. Ingram clearly could not fill that role of being 1A. Kawhi Leonard could do that. We saw one. You think about Kawhi last year. What stands out? What stands out to me is his efficiency, right? So now he's put in a situation to Toronto that yeah, he's older. He can't carry an entire franchise, but look, he's gonna have to do less. It's not going to be on his back to be responsible to do so much. He's flanked by Scotty Barnes. He's flanked by RJ Barrett. Quickly will be back healthy. So he will be in a position where he won't attract all the defense and he will just have to 1-2 dribble score, 1-2 dribble shoot, or catch and shoot. So, and he proved last year that he could do that at a high rate. So the Toronto Raptors are automatically better. They got somebody that they could throw the ball to and that can actually bring home the bacon. And the biggest thing about Toronto, what was their identity? Toughness. And so Kawhi Leonard is surrounded with the roster that always has fit his ethos, right? And now he might not be as tough defensively or physically as he was in the past, but he's surrounded by guys like him, and all he needs to do is bring home the tidiness offensively because that's what Toronto lacked. As tough, as gritty as they weren't really that tidy offensively. So for both sides, I think it's a win. Don't forget about Colin Murray Bowles as well to take another leap. And then they're in the East, which again is going to be wide open. It feels like the power shift is getting stronger on that side, but I definitely love this for both sides. And finally, Josh, I will say the first thing that came to my mind when I saw this trade come off is the grass is just not greener on the other side. Because Kawhi did all of this for what? There's no legacy in LA. You could have had you a legacy in Toronto these past 7 years. And so this is just a message to, NBA players out there who are always looking for the next thing. The grass isn't always greener.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Kawhi had made all the noises really about wanting to retire back home in LA for him. That is now not going to be the case. So it'll be interesting to see, when Kawhi does come to retire. Like, I think Clippers fans have a fair amount to thank him for, but only really in the way that, like, New York Knicks fans have thanked Julius Randle over the past few weeks as, like, the Clippers weren't necessarily a serious franchise before Kawhi Leonard got there. Yes, they had the Lob City era, but that ultimately amounted to nothing and was built on two guys in DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin that they drafted anyway, and CP was the big piece that they kind of plugged into that. But before that, they weren't a very serious franchise. Kawhi came, made them more of a serious franchise, but as you say, Drew, there's been a lot of debacles really over the past few years, and one legacy that he does leave in terms of those debacles is the aspiration thing, which the Clippers may still see a punishment for. So a very complicated legacy for Kawhi Leonard, but we'll move on from him. Oh, go on, sorry.
Quickly before we move out, because I just think you contradicted yourself. You said that Kawhi has made the Clippers more of a serious organization. Well, think about all of the antics that has followed that with the aspiration, with the sitting out, the coming and going, all of these things. To me, that makes them less serious
True.
to put
Yeah.
up with all that. So a little bit of contradiction I got to call the Clipper fan out on.
Yeah, I'm saying serious in terms of winning. I'm saying I'm separating on court and off court artists here, separating the art from the artist. The off court stuff is going to continue to be confusing until whatever comes out from that investigation comes out. But the on court stuff, at least the Clippers were a winning franchise for basically every single year. I think it literally is every single year. Maybe besides last year was the first 50 win year, 500 year I should say, for the Clippers. So yeah, all the best success to Kawhi Leonard in Toronto. I'm excited to see this next era of Clippers basketball just because I think it looks young and exciting. There may even be a Peyton Watson piece to plug into that as well, which hopefully me and Drew will be reacting to over the next few weeks. But moving on to the next sort of big splash of the offseason, for me, probably the third biggest of all these trades really is the LaMelo Ball trade from the Charlotte Hornets to the Minnesota Timberwolves. A few interesting moves really for both sides that kind of like play into this, I think, a little bit. Drew, we saw Julius Randle get traded to the Nets at the time. That happened, around the time of Giannis getting traded to the Heat. At first, it seemed like they were doing that to free up the money to get Giannis, but then quite quickly Giannis went to the Heat, so that was off the table then for Minnesota. But they do make this big splash, and certainly an interesting one. Like the more I think about it, I think the more confused I get with like the idea of fit around this one on Basketball Fit. So you might help me sort of shed some light on this really in terms of how a LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards backcourt could work. But the one thing I will say is that, Minnesota had a positional problem in terms of the point guard last season. They get, for me, one of the more premier point guards in the league with LaMelo Ball. Yes, he comes with his own issues, but this is no disrespect to the Charlotte Hornets at all, because I actually really like Charlotte as a franchise, but Charlotte only really became a serious franchise and more of a winning franchise last season, really. Before that, they were just a bit of a laughingstock of the league, and LaMelo Ball, I think, kind of lent into that almost in the way that he played basketball on the court. Not to say that, he was leaning into being a laughingstock, more just that he was like, this is my franchise, I can kind of do what I want, I can throw up some bullshit. Whereas now he's going into like a team that's meant to contend. He's gonna have to lock in like this. This is now like get rich or die trying for LaMelo Ball, and if there's anyone alongside him who I think will make him, look into that sort of winning lens more, it's surely got to be Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, when I look at both of these teams from Charlotte's perspective, it was a culture shift. Very, very clear, moving away from Miles Bridges and also LaMelo Ball. And, I've seen a lot of people talk about, they're confused of why Charlotte will get rid of LaMelo Ball because they're finally winning. And they had some success. They were exciting last year. But then, like, give it more context. They didn't even make the playoffs. They got blew off the frame by Orlando in that play-in where Charlotte was the favorites. And so you've had 6 or 7 years with LaMelo. You've had no success. It's time to move forward. It's time to freshen it up. We know the NBA, things change very fast. And so I like this from Charlotte. You get some guys in there that are more culture guys that kind of fit the corporate commercial angle and for that specific city. And this has always been the case with sports, is that you can deal with antics until the talent doesn't meet up with the antics. There's been a lot of antics with LaMelo Ball. We can go as far as the driving incidents, the car accidents and all of that stuff, the speeding off out of, and yeah, that's a minor thing. And I don't like to bring a lot of personal stuff into the basketball space, but that stuff has exceeded what he has been able to bring onto the court. The inefficiencies on the court. He had a great year this year, but we have to remember that he was very limited in minutes. And you can afford to pay someone 50 million who is, has a 25, 30-minute cap out there. So I like this for Charlotte. For Minnesota, it's very obvious. You just got to close your eyes and you just got to swing the hell out of the bat, and hopefully you connect with one, and hopefully one will go over the fence, because right now it's all about the San Antonio Spurs and OKC in the West. You can't match that, right? You can't match the size of what OKC has in the front court. You can't match the size that what San Antonio has with Wemby. So you have to try to find another way. And right now, the Minnesota Timberwolves, yes, they're tiny, but they're fast. They're small. They're going to get up and down the court, and they're going to say, let's see how much these 7-footers can run with us, giddy up. And, I like the swing, because this was the only way, this is the only option. You've made, 2 consecutive conference finals runs besides this previous year. That was their ceiling, and they needed a point guard upgrade. You take a risk with LaMelo Ball. You see what happens. You said the fit with him and Anthony Edwards. I bet you they're not going to double Anthony Edwards like they did in the postseason because we know LaMelo's ability to shoot or to get hot, although he's streaky. But then again, you got a playmaker. One thing that you and I talked about here on the playoffs is that I did not like the way that Minnesota's offense looked so stagnant. It was a lot of Jaylen Brown pounding the ball from Anthony Edwards, and that doesn't get it done. So now you got a guy that can catch the ball on the second side. He can attack off the second side. He doesn't have to initiate the offense. He doesn't have to create for himself. He can now attack a scrambling defense because LaMelo Ball can pass. He can create. He can create angles, and so you're going to see things get a lot easier for Anthony Edwards moving forward in the future. And I think he's going to be more efficient. His 3-point ball, career high last season, and takes and makes, and that is only going to be an uptick in that department.
Yeah, absolutely. And interested to see the way Naz Reid fits in for the Charlotte Hornets as well. I said to a friend the other day that it's strange, really, like even a few of the moves the Chicago Bulls have made over the offseason, from, even the appointment of the GM Bryson Graham, like everything that I've heard him say so far, appointing Thiago Splitter as the new head coach, kind of picking up on what Portland have maybe left behind or left on the table there. It's strange seeing the Bulls and Hornets, who, for me and most of my NBA watching life, have been really laughing stocks of the NBA, start to look like serious franchises now. And that's kind of the way I see this trade and the Miles Bridges trade for the Charlotte Hornets, really, is that, you mentioned, Drew, you don't want to get too much into off-court stuff, and I'm not necessarily here to do that either, but LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges came with, albeit very different degrees of baggage and degrees of, I guess just seriousness of the baggage that comes with both of them in terms of off-court stuff. And I'd also argue, like, in terms of on-court contributions, I think LaMelo Ball contributed far more, really, than Miles Bridges did up until maybe last season, where Miles kind of came to the party a little bit more. But both of these moves kind of feel to me like the Hornets going, okay, like, we just want to clear the decks here. We see this as like Con Caneppel's team. Really like what we got in Kobe White. We've got some big guys that we feel like we can lean on now, but Naz Reid plugs perfectly into that. And I don't expect the Hornets to take many backward steps based on what we saw from them last season, even with the loss of these two, talented offensive guys.
I mean, that's a great point. Think about it. How many franchises out there now, all of a sudden, now that the draft is over with, now that free agency is still ongoing, but we've seen the moves. I can't think of any really joke franchises right now that you can be laughing at. Maybe New Orleans, possibly, but they still got Zion. Maybe Sacramento, but they just dropped DeMar DeRozan, so they're looking to get a little bit more serious, and they got a point guard there that's going to be the face of the franchise. And so this is why I love the new draft. That's coming in next year, the draft reform, to where you can't afford to be a joke. You have to be competitive, and that's why I keep saying this, that next season is going to be lit.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we're already getting into the mindset of that. This the sort of hard thing about, I guess, being someone who's going to summer league, but even just a summer league watcher and enjoyer in general, is that, like, we're gonna have our appetite for next season really satiated by summer league. Gonna come away being like, oh, look at all these rookies and these second year guys that are looking to take a leap this season, and then suddenly months of just like barren wasteland of NBA talking points. But hopefully, me and you can still find a way to jump on here and make it palatable for the NBA fans over in the UK. But it takes us nicely on to a player who actually captured the imagination of a lot of fans, NBA fans in the UK this season, in Ja Morant, when the Memphis Grizzlies came to play in the NBA London game earlier in the season. The Grizzlies, of course, winning that game as well over the Orlando Magic. But it seemed like even from then, there was a lot of trade talks. A lot of those press conferences were kind of, almost drowned out by Ja Morant trade talks, really. I remember the Grizzlies coach Thomas Isolo getting, hounded with those questions at the time, even from UK members of the media, because we've all got, KPIs to meet and headlines to write and things like that. So even then, the rumours were swirling. It seemed just inevitable that Ja Morant was going to get traded. I have to be honest, Drew, if you'd have said to me the team he'd get traded to, and the reasons that Portland wanted to trade for him to put him in a backcourt along with Damian Lillard, I'd be scratching my head slightly. Like, again, when you say about, like, talk about serious franchises, maybe I would throw Portland into, like, I don't quite know whether they are serious or not yet, because a lot of the moves they're making at the moment do have me, like, scratching my head quite a lot, I would say.
Yeah, again, from Memphis perspective, just like Charlotte, it's a culture reset. Again, the NBA, the way that the economics are currently sit at, you can't afford to pay someone $50 million if they don't tick every box now, because you get punished. The first box being winning, you got to be able to win. The second box is you have to have good culture because again, you have to have a stable of players now. It's not just one guy. You got to rely on 9, 10 guys. And so it's a culture shift. Memphis, they're going to be in the lottery next year, but they put themselves in a position to be semi-competitive. But you move into a different era, and rightfully so. Ja Morant had his opportunity. He blew it. On the other side for Portland, you just bring in a playmaker. I don't mind it because it's a very low risk move for Portland. You're not in a win now situation. You're not in a position to compete in the West. I don't care that you're bringing Dame Lillard back. He's coming off an Achilles at 30 plus years old. So you're just again you're just mixing in talent. It's kind of like a poor man's Philadelphia 76ers. Let me gobble up some talent and see what happens to see what direction we really need to move on into in the future. And so that's what Portland has done. Because I kind of not to the same extreme. It's different extremes when you talk about Ja Morant and Jaylen Brown. I don't want to put Jaylen Brown in Ja Morant's bracket. That's unfair to him. But Ja Morant, if you are not motivated by how you all of a sudden was the guy, the face of the NBA, and now you look and you're getting left behind. No one cares about you anymore. That's how quickly this thing will pass you by. You don't think that he's in the gym every day thinking about that? All of these guys are prideful. He's going to want to make a name for himself from a basketball point of view. You don't think he looks at those numbers he had? That there was one point during the season last year he was shooting 19% from the three. You don't think he hears the noise that but once this you've lost a step athletically, and so you don't have it anymore because you can't shoot. You don't think he hears all this noise. So Portland has a low risk situation bringing in Ja Morant but bringing in a former superstar that is heavily motivated. And let's see where it gets us. It's not going to bring us a championship, but maybe it continues to allow us to take this next step forward next year in a situation that is a 1 year situation for everybody included. Even the coach. The coach is on a 1 year deal. So everybody in the building of Portland is going to be incredibly motivated, including Dame Lillard, who is coming off an Achilles injury. So they talked a lot about the pairing, that they can't coexist. I see Dame Lillard moving off the ball more because what is one thing that Dame Lillard can do that Ja Morant can't? He can shoot the snot off the ball. He's won multiple three-point contests. So I don't think Dame Lillard has a problem with moving off the ball and being in a catch and shoot situation now that he won't have the same step now that he's torn his Achilles. And now you have someone in the backcourt with you with Ja Morant who will have a little bit more space because you know the guy next to you. They're not leaving him. So again, it's a low risk situation for Portland. Let's see what sticks on the wall.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm slightly worried about the direction of travel for Portland. I don't know if I'm getting too sort of caught up in the talk around their ownership and things that happened last season, but I definitely think there's like a little bit of muddled thinking there. I'll be interested to see the way that the Ja Morant fit works. I can see, based on your reasoning there, how that can work if he's sort of, the guy who brings the ball up the floor and Dame kind of plays more off ball. I think that probably suits a guy who's, in his 30s coming off an ACL as well, that it's not on him to get hounded by the point of attack defender every night. That can be on Ja Morant, and Ja Morant can obviously play that sort of inside out game that we referred to with the Boston Celtics before. But interesting again, the Memphis Grizzlies continue to pivot into this new era, and even the trade of Santi Aldama to the Dallas Mavericks, it seems like they are ready to give the keys of the franchise over now, really, to of course Cam Boozer, who was drafted by them third in this draft, but also Cedric Coward, who they drafted last season. These are two guys that it seems like they are ready to hand over to. And again, talking about franchises who've maybe gone from kind of being like laughing stocks to suddenly like lock-in serious. Maybe the Memphis Grizzlies don't quite qualify because they're still a bit too young for that, but the way I see it, like, Santi Aldama was part of the Ja Morant era for them. Yes, a brilliant player and a guy who brought probably more to them over the last 2-3 seasons, you'd say, than Ja Morant did, which is a damning indictment of the last 2 or 3 seasons for Ja Morant. But a time for them to, lean into this rebuild now, lean into their young guys, and hopefully be an exciting young team. Because I think the mission for exciting young teams in the NBA now is basically try not to finish in those relegation spots. If you do, it is what it is. But otherwise, just try and be a fun young team, get some wins on the board, and see where you end up in the lottery.
Yeah, that's a great point. And this is why, although, on paper, a lot of these rosters, there's a lot of question marks on how it will fit. I think the approach by some of these GMs on the bottom feeders are, let's just throw some young bodies out there and let's be exciting and see what happens. So, yeah, I think from their perspective, they don't even see how it's going to unfold. I just think that you just need a collaboration of young talent that's hungry and that's going to play hard. And with Memphis, we saw that Cedric Howard was a very hungry young man. And then we know Boozer, Cam Boozer's style fits that as well. And then you're flanked by some muscle with Isaiah Stewart, who's coming up there and kind of fit that DNA of Memphis. So yeah, I don't see Memphis doing anything outside. See them fighting in the relegation zone, but at least they know they will have an exciting future and they can move off that culture that Ja Morant created.
Yeah, I'm excited for the second coming of the grit and grind Grizzlies. I have to say, with Zach Edey and Cam Boozer being more like ground band guys, Isaiah Stewart being an elite rim protector and a guy who literally at times will fight for his teammates and things like that. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how Memphis kind of leans into that new era of grit and grind now. But on the topic of Isaiah Stewart going to the Grizzlies, we'll move on to free agents because there's been some interesting pickups over the last few weeks, and particularly in Detroit's sense. They go and pick up John Collins from the Clippers. It seems like that actually may turn into a three-team trade. It's going to turn into a sign and trade eventually, and then potentially into the three-team trade that will get the Clippers Peyton Watson, if what I'm reading in the tea leaves is correct in that sense. But they get John Collins from the Clippers, as I say, to be their new four. Tobias Harris moves on to the San Antonio Spurs as well. So two free agent moves that kind of impact Detroit in different ways there, Drew. But two that I don't really hate for the Pistons. I think it was clear that they were kind of, as much as Tobias Harris helps, I think Tobias Harris will help the San Antonio Spurs out endlessly. By the way, I think he's such a good pickup for the Spurs. They're almost past that timeline of Tobias Harris now on the Pistons. They need to find a different way to play, which I think Tobias Harris was kind of just bailing Detroit out for, really. So they lean more into that now. They get a guy in John Collins who shot really well from three last season, of kind of being a guy in the corner but can also operate in the dunker spot too. Definitely brings you more offensively than Beef Stew did, albeit Beef Stew, as I mentioned, that elite level of rim protection and defense all around. Really, you lose a step on that when you bring in John Collins, but there's probably more moves to come from the Pistons. I have to say, I like what they've done so far, and I really like the pickup of Tobias Harris for the San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah, with Detroit, they had a fantastic year last year, but I think it was very clear. You and I, we were always concerned about Detroit. It just was not sustainable for the future. I said it, Tobias Harris could not be your second best player, which he was in the playoffs if you're going to win a championship. So he kept them afloat. He did a wonderful job. He's extended his career, but now you upgraded with John Collins. But more importantly, you get younger. You kind of fit more of the timeline of Cade Cunningham, Thompson. And then I love the fact that they gave Paul Reed, who was the third string behind Jalen Duren, behind Isaiah Stewart. But when my eye test told me all season that he was the best out of Isaiah Stewart. So now you have a legitimate backup there. Let's see how the Jalen Duren things unfolds. I don't have a problem with Detroit kind of playing hardball with him because that's your fault at the end of the day. Like, it's not like you had a bad game. It's not like you had two bad games. You had a bad, horrible playoffs, and we have a huge sample size to see that. It would have almost worked better for Jalen Duren if Detroit got knocked out the first round, and you're like, it was a bad series. Well, he had a bad playoffs, and we had two series to kind of judge that. You can't ignore that. And so with Jalen Duren, I know he wants his money. He's going to get his money. But if you're Detroit, you can't afford to pay him Kay Cunningham type of money. He is definitely not a Robin. If he wants to come in at a cheaper rate, then albeit, but I like the hardball from Detroit. Yeah, it's a lot of other moves around the NBA, a lot of the teams kind of moving around the edges, but we don't really know how this all is going to look until the King decides what he's gonna do, which is very fascinating.
Absolutely, yeah. I was just going to make the point of CBA restrictions and maybe teams sort of feeling things out. I get the sense the Clippers are doing that a little bit with Benedict Mathurin as well, seeing what the market is for him. He's been extended the qualifying offer in the same way that Jalen Duren was with the Detroit Pistons. So of course, I don't imagine this happens. But if free agency ends, Jalen Duren doesn't just walk away from the Detroit Pistons. Benedict Mathurin doesn't walk away from the Clippers. They'll be given that qualifying offer and they'll go on to a small contract. For next season, I imagine that someone at some stage decides that they want to pay Jalen Duren X amount of money for X amount of years, and Detroit matches that. But of course, Detroit could be on the hook for, I think it's like 100 million more over the course of a contract if they would just offer him the maximum amount that they can offer him. So no surprise really, especially in this new era of the CBA, that Detroit are playing hardball, as you say. But then, Drew, I've got to be honest. Like I'd said a couple of times this season that I thought LeBron James's next destination was the Golden State Warriors. I thought it made the most sense in terms of like him having one last retirement tour fun season where he goes and plays with Steph Curry. Steph Curry maybe does his retirement tour in the year after once LeBron is out of the picture, and Steve Kerr probably follows Steph Curry out the door in that time as well. Draymond Green, I'm sure, would love to play alongside LeBron James, given how much their friendship has blossomed over the past few years too. But even LeBron is playing hardball a little bit, which I'm not trying to say that's like a CBA thing, but I definitely worry a little bit for the Golden State Warriors because it seems to me like they're holding out, like they've not been a part of a few deals that maybe it seemed like they would have tried to have been a part of. I know the Rui Hachimura one to the Clippers was one that was rumored that Golden State could maybe look into because they feel like they need that position filled at four, but they've put all their eggs in this LeBron James basket. And while I respect that, as you say, the king has to decide what the king wants to do, time is going to keep moving on. And at some point, the Golden State Warriors might have to pivot or leave themselves completely short if it can't be LeBron James.
Yeah, I honestly don't know what the right fit is for LeBron James. It all for me, it all depends on how you want the story to end. But what's really standing out to me with LeBron is that this is the curse of all of those decisions in the past to whatever, however you want to describe it, jump teams, jump ship, whatever, however you want to kind of summarize that. But this is the issue when you come to the end of the rainbow is that you really don't have a home. I mean, Cleveland is you could say that is probably the best story ending to LeBron, but I'm just looking at what's out there. Golden State, that's fun. You're not gonna win. Like that's fascinating for the fans. That situation reminds me of the '04 Lakers when you had Karl Malone and Gary Payton. That could get ugly. Miami, him and Giannis, ill. That fit it just doesn't seem right to me. I mean, I just don't know what's out there for LeBron, and I don't know if he knows. But what comes to my mind is the consequence of jumping ship, and don't be surprised if Kevin Durant is in a similar situation in 3 or 4 years as well. It's just not a lot of stuff from my perspective that makes a lot of sense. Um, he's damned if he do, he's damned if he don't. If he goes to a team that's right there knocking on the door, then you're bandwagon. So I do love one thing that he has put out, that Rich Paul has put out in his podcast, is that LeBron just wants happiness. And I'm with him because you whatever decision you make is going to be criticized. Just go out there, man, and pick a situation that will make you happy playing basketball and being able to end this thing on your terms. That's how I see it. Don't ring chase. You know, don't look for the perfect storybook ending, because even if he goes back to Cleveland, like that is a storybook ending to the book, but the style of play, ew, it doesn't fit. Harden, ball dominant. Mitchell just signed a 4-year extension this morning. Then you're flanked by two 7-footers who can't shoot. It just doesn't fit.
Yeah, I like that it was happiness and indoor and outdoor golf seemed to be the two or the three preferences I should say of LeBron James. Just funny to see how that continues to unravel over the next few weeks. But yeah, for now, leaving a hole in the Golden State Warriors. Golden State have put their cards on the table, saying that they want LeBron James. If I had to put money on it now, Drew, that is where I think he will end up still come the end of this free agency window or going into the start of the season, at which sort of ever point comes first there really. But to me, that was always my preference really. Like I like the idea of seeing him and Steph play together. I like the idea of seeing Steve Kerr getting to coach him, almost like an expendable type situation with the Golden State Warriors there. But for now, he does leave that hole in the team as they continue to hold out for him. And of course, he left a hole in the Lakers team too, and the Lakers made some big moves to try and shore that up. I saw you and Mo Moontsy having a bit of a conversation of back and forth about this on Twitter, and I kind of chipped in just at the point that Walker Kessler ended up making a sign and trade to the Lakers there, because to me, like everyone who listens to this podcast will know I come into this with pretty heavy Lakers bias really, but I always try and come into it with a neutral hat on as well. Like I don't like the Lakers, but if they make good moves, I'll come on here and say they've made good moves. I like Luka Doncic as the basketball player. I like LeBron James as the basketball player. I don't necessarily like the moves that the Lakers have made to try and build this basketball team around Luka Doncic, and not for the reasons that people may think. I heard on, I think it was Bill Simmons and Zach Lowe discussing this the other day, that they were kind of talking about, oh, Luka's just like really rebuilt a version of the Dallas Mavericks, and I actually don't agree with that, because what Luka had on the Dallas Mavericks was a bunch of guys who could take some of the defensive burden off Luka, as well as guys who could sit in the corner and hit threes, a center who could rebound and set pick and rolls for him and stuff. And they didn't necessarily get that in Walker Kessler anyway. I think Walker Kessler has a lot to prove, and he now has to prove it with a contract of over $30 million per year. I think he's going to have to prove that he's a really good pick and roll guy, a good screen setter, a good guy rolling to the basket. Yes, elite rebounder, elite rim protector. He's shown those things even in his short time with the Utah Jazz, short time on the court. But in Sandro Mamukelashvili, like, a great 3-point shooter, yes, but not a great defender. Austin Reeves, we know, is not a great defender. Really, the best defenders it seems like they've sort of got in these last few days are guys that can come off the bench, and even then, like, I don't think Quentin Grimes and Colin Sexton are like elite level NBA defenders. They're just guys who show a lot of heart and a lot of energy, and that counts for something on the defensive end. So the Lakers, I feel like, have left Luka with a lot of defensive responsibility in some ways. I don't know. I can just see this amounting to not very much for the Lakers, and more first, maybe second round at a push playoff exits.
I wish I had more time to debate Mo on Twitter specifically about the Lakers, because I got the feeling that he was pro Lakers and what they were trying to do, but I didn't have time to go back and forth. Before this roster was even constructed, I tweeted, I was like, I don't like it. And it has nothing to do about the Lakers being white. Let's put that out there. For me personally,
the snow time Lakers.
yeah, it has nothing to do about that. My issue is that the Lakers were, if I remember the stats correctly, they were the fourth slowest team last year. The NBA is about depth. It's about athleticism. It's about getting out in transition. It's about playing fast. They don't have any athleticism. I mean, when you think about scoring, this is what was my issue about the Lakers last year, is that it was for them to score, such a struggle. And yes, Luka Doncic can pull a rabbit out of his hat, but it's not in this NBA. It's not sustainable. You think about transition. Look at the team. You look at Doncic, Reeves, Grimes, Vanderbilt, Kessler, Hardy, Sexton, Cameron Carr, Jake LaRavia, Sandro, Bronny James. Who can dunk? Who can come down the lane and jump on somebody, dunk on somebody, like, and create like a momentum play? That's my issue with the Lakers, is they don't have any easy bucket getters. Luka's gonna get his points. Reeves is gonna get his points, but it's going to be like, damn, ooh, shit, damn, what a shot. Those type of shots, and over the course of an 8-month NBA season, it ain't sustainable, man.
No, it takes a toll on your body, and we already saw that in Dallas. That Dallas was good regular season team, would always rely on Luka too heavily to be a good regular season team, and ultimately flame out in the playoffs. Besides the 1 year they actually got Luka a lot of help, but as I say, a lot of that help came on the defensive end. It came with athleticism of guys like Derrick Jones Jr. and even after him, PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and pieces like that, Derek Lively. The list could go on. Really, all of these guys are, as you say, Drew, guys with athleticism, guys who are good on the defensive end. I'm definitely worried for the Lakers that they don't have enough of that going into next season. But that about brings it to an end, really, Drew. Unless there's anything else that you sort of wanted to point out from free agency, there's a lot of other little moves around the edges that happen in teams, kind of tighten up rotations and stuff. And I think we'll see more of that over the coming weeks. The Houston Rockets have made a couple of moves. If you wanted to make a little bit of a comment on them, they picked up Bogdan Bogdanovic after the Clippers turned down his team option. They re-signed Tari Eason. Seems to me like they're just prepared to run it back, and besides that, as I say, maybe some little fringe moves here and there for them and a couple of other teams.
Yeah, I think we'll save that for next episode because I'm sweating my tits off. So if you guys say in the UK it's hot as hell out here, it's 90 degrees. I'm burning up out here,
Oh
man,
God.
sacrificing from you guys. And it's only going to get hotter and spicier next week as we come from you in Las Vegas. But yeah, I think we'll save that for the next time we come on because hopefully LeBron will be able to make his decision and some other teams will be able to clean up. But just a word on the Rockets, just quickly. I don't know yet. I don't know yet. They got some shooting, but I don't know yet. We need to see what happens with Fred VanVleet first, so we'll see.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of wait and see to come for now, so we can, of course, be locked in to be covering that over the next few weeks. But let's rescue Drew from out of that Texas sunshine. I'm gonna have to bring the Factor 50 out next week for this Vegas sunshine. I've been
You
trying to
better,
top up the
man.
tan, trying to top up the tan a little bit here in the UK, doing some gardening and things like that. But nothing's gonna hit like that Vegas strip heat. So Drew, you're gonna have to look after me in that sense, man, to make sure that we can bring more good content to these good listeners of our podcast Crossover the Pond. Excited for me to take that trip over the pond to see Drew out there. But all that is left to say for this week's episode of Crossover the Pond is, Drew, lead us out.
Stay tuned, guys. What happens in Vegas usually stays in Vegas, but Josh and I are here to let the rabbit out the hat and tell the world.
Document it all.
But that's the cool thing about Vegas is that the unknown, you have no idea how things are going to unfold. But one thing about Summer League in that week is that shit just happens. And that's the excitement for me is you don't know what's going to unfold, but moves just happen to organically happen. So I'm excited to be in the saddle with you, man, and see what the city has in store for us and for Crossover the Pond. Until then, guys, make sure you tap in. Like, subscribe, tell a friend. We will bring you the morning news on Crossover the Pond. Until then, we'll see you in Viva Las Vegas. Drew, Josh, peace out, guys. Have a great week.